This is the Conservative American Message, hosted by the one, the only, Cam Lau. Today is March 17th, 2025, and today is also St. Patrick's Day. As you can see, I tried to make a little bit of effort, kind of wearing a little bit green here. You wouldn't be here to pinch me anyhow, so I guess I'm safe. Alexander Hamilton said, "There are some who maintain that trade will regulate itself, and it is not to be benefited by the encouragements or restraints of government. Such persons will imagine that there is no need of a common directing power. This is one of those wild speculative paradoxes, which have grown in credit among us, contrary to the uniform practice and sense of the most enlightened nations." Before I do bless you with my political insights, I'm going to have to ask you to pay for it this time. I provide this podcast to you weekly, for free. Well, mostly weekly, but it's for free. I don't make you pay for anything. So I'm just going to ask a small favor here. I need you to, wherever you're listening right now, whether it be Spotify, Apple, whatever, please rate this podcast 5 stars. That really helps us. It goes a long way to promote the show. I also want you to follow me and follow me on social media at the Conservative American Message on Instagram and Facebook. That is going to be your ticket to admission today. If you didn't do those things, then just shut it off right now, because it's not free. You got to pay. I haven't posted on this podcast for a while. That's been for a variety of reasons. I think it's been about over a month, at least 4 episodes that I've gypped you guys on. There's been a lot of different reasons, like I said, but mostly it's been due to me being in the process of moving, between packing, moving everything up. We had quite a wild ride there, but now we're all set up. I'm in my new studio right now recording this episode, and I thought I'd try to get the quality of the podcast up a little bit, so we're going to start adding video, as you might be able to see. There should be video with the podcast now in this new studio. I don't have everything set up yet, but you can at least see me. That's a start. In the meantime, while you were waiting for more content to get out, I decided that I'd start a little blog also. So you might have seen some blog posts posted on our social media. If you want to check those out, you can find them on the website at campodcast.square.site. The link will also be in the description. Well, Donald Trump has certainly talked a lot about tariffs since he first started his political career. Especially leading into this re-election campaign, he talked an awful lot about how we're getting ripped off across the world. Since he became president, people have been wildly speculative as to what he's going to actually do. The stock market has, well, I wouldn't say it's tanked, but it's been hit a little bit. But that's all just speculative based on people fear-mongering about what Trump's going to really do. A tariff has turned into a sort of bad word, but there was a time when the United States' entire tax revenue was basically just from tariffs. A little bit of sales tax and some property taxes, but it was mostly just tariffs at that time. All a tariff is just a tax on an imported good. So say that you're a manufacturer and you need steel to make your product. Now you have all these steel companies all across the world to choose from. You can buy from this American company that has very high quality, very expensive steel, or you can buy from a Chinese company that's probably got decent quality, but the prices are slashed in half. Now, why is that? How can China have such cheaper prices? I mean, they have to ship it all the way to the United States? Well, geez, I mean, China is a communist country with no standard of living whatsoever. They basically rely on slave labor for most of their industries. It's no wonder they can beat an American company's prices. The Americans, we have to provide legitimate wages and compete for workers here. We have to follow all kinds of rules and regulations in any industry. The Chinese just don't have to do that. So I don't see how that's fair that a company is forced to make that choice. Now, some companies are going to stand on their morals and say, we're only going to source everything from America. Everything's going to be made in America. And while I can appreciate that, I also understand as a businessman that's just plain stupid. Now, there are special cases. I mean, there's a lot of these American-sourced and manufactured products that's actually part of their marketing. But as a general rule, as a businessman, you need to pay the cheapest price to produce your goods. And if that cheaper price is coming from outside of the United States, I don't care how patriotic you are, money talks. It doesn't make anybody evil. You just have to do the most economical thing for yourself. So what a tariff does is it puts a tax on that good. So that steel that I'm buying from China, well, now I have to pay let's say a 25% tax on that. Well, if it was less than that amount difference from the American company, well, now it's cheaper for me to buy from the American company. Now, yes, that increases my cost of production, which I'm going to have to pass along to the consumer, but in turn, it's going to create more American jobs, create more American demand for steel, and improve our economy overall, rather than just outsourcing everything to other countries. Now, Americans are lazy, and they don't want to have to actually do any real work. That's why there's not as many steel mills, there's not as many factories. All of these jobs are being outsourced because Americans would rather just sit behind a desk and whine about inflation. Now, tariffs are not a new thing. As I said, they were the main source of revenue for the U.S. government for years. I mean, you had tariffs, property tax, property tax, sales tax. That was it. There was no income tax. But the entire world has also seen tariffs as a positive thing for their countries. So the idea that America is not allowed to play the same game as everybody else is just preposterous. In 2023, according to the World Trade Organization, the average tariff rate for the United States, so this is just average across all goods, and it varies widely by country, by product, everything, but the average was 3.3%. In Canada, it was up to 3.8%. Japan, with their booming economy, 4.2%. Now you get to Mexico, which Mexico and Canada, there's been a lot of talk about the last couple weeks, and we've had different deals with them, especially with Obama, with NAFTA and free trade across the borders. Well, Mexico has an average tariff rate now of 6.8%. You go to China, one of our biggest trade partners, 7.5%. Now, for us in the ag industry, Brazil is always a country that comes up. Their tariff is at 13.3% on average. Another booming Asian country is South Korea. Their economy is getting larger and larger. Their tariff is at 13.4%. And of course, India, which Trump continues to bring up all the time as being the reason for India's resurgence in the global spectrum of economies, is their massive 17% average tariff. Now, everybody, or all these economists that are all these liberal, college-educated people, are arguing against tariffs, saying it's going to ruin our country. But at the same time, you can find just as many economists who agree with you. And that's the thing with experts. It's just whoever they work for that they're going to agree with. Now, I'm certainly no economist and no expert, but from what I've read, what I understand, and what common sense tells me is that this is going to increase government revenue. If you have more money coming in, you'll have more money that you can spend. And some of that money obviously needs to be spent on the national debt, which we already can't afford to pay the interest on. But more money coming into the government, as a Republican, I'm even saying this, more money coming into the government is not a bad thing. It's what we do with that money. And Trump talks about paying down the national debt with a lot of this extra tariff revenue. Not to even mention all of the cuts that Doge has been making. That's a whole nother conversation. But just like anybody's personal budget, you want to max out your income and minimize your expenses. Trump's a businessman. I mean, obviously. But there's a lot of other benefits to tariffs too. I mean, the impact on the economy in the past, we've had tariffs before. Well, we've always had tariffs, but we've had massive tariffs that have accounted for most of the U.S. revenue for years. In the 1800s, going back to the founding of this country, that was how this was done. There was no income tax. But we need to have a more domestic supply chain. If you look at what happened during COVID, I mean, we cannot continue to outsource everything to these other countries. There has to be some kind of economic incentive to build factories and have manufacturing, distribution, all of these essential items of our economy to be within our country. I mean, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of problems, especially when you outsource it to countries like Russia and China that we might not always be on the best terms with. You don't want to rely on Russia for your energy. That's what Germany's gotten itself into the situation of. How can Germany come out and support Ukraine when Russia is feeding their natural gas? It's a tough situation. Now, exceptions are obviously made and everything is differently decided, whether it be the country, the product. There's a different tariff rate for all of those things. There's been a lot of numbers thrown around, different things that have been enacted, different things that have just been talked about so far by the Trump administration. But what he's talked about as far as like exceptions, a reduced or possibly even no tariff on, say, potash coming out of Canada. That is a fertilizer that, we really rely on in agriculture here in the United States. And to allow Canada, a country that we have a decent relationship with compared to our other sources of potash around the world, it might not be a bad idea to leave an exception for Canadian potash. We did the same thing with Mexico with some of their technology, computers, kind of things that we get from them. We have lessened or even possibly are going to make an exception for those certain products. And obviously, we should have a higher tariff with countries that do more harm to us with their tariffs, in retaliation almost in a way. And the argument's always made, well, won't they just retaliate and it'll go back and forth? Well, they can try, but the fact of the matter is, as much as the American economy has outsourced, they still can't get by without us. Companies are still going to have to rely on the United States. I mean, most of what we would really be losing as far as inflation on the consumer level is going to be completely offset by the gains in production domestically. And like I said, we have got to protect our industries here in this country. Not even just our industries, but our jobs. I mean, there's going to come a time here where people cannot find a job. It's coming up very soon, but we've lived in this economy where people are so highly valued that you can't even find a job for less than half of the minimum or less than double the minimum wage. It's insane. Now, we can even look at subsidies and some of these products that have to be subsidized by the U.S. government just to compete on a global scale. That would be eliminated a lot by tariffs. If you have products that we're subsidizing here, we might not have to do that if it made more sense to buy our own products in this country. It's just not safe to rely on other countries. You don't know what can happen in the world, and it's a lot safer to rely on countries that we have a closer relationship with. Some of these enemy countries of ours, like China, we need to really be careful about. We don't want to rely on them for too much. And obviously, these tariffs are more often than not used as a negotiation tactic. It gives us leverage when we make different deals with people. And that's what Trump's really all about. I mean, he is the art of the deal man. I mean, he's going to make deals with other countries and take tariffs away, give more tariffs to other countries. And he's just going to work out the best deal for the United States. But that's all we should really care about. I'm not so concerned about the impact on the world economy. That's not my problem. The real problem is that our current government would rather just slap more income taxes on everything, or inflate our currency, which is their first form of taxation they go to. Imposing tariffs on other countries, that's a big no-no to our politicians who take in massive amounts of donations from some of these foreign countries. It's just impossible for the United States to compete with a global marketplace of people who have no standard of living whatsoever. You're competing against child labor, people living in huts, and expecting Americans to earn a living, decent wage and come up with the same products. It's just not going to happen. Tariffs are a good thing, and I'm so glad Trump is starting to implement some of these policies. For being the world's superpower, the United States sure knows how to get screwed by other countries. Not just in trade, but even when it comes to Ukraine, that has conned us out of hundreds of billions of dollars. This corrupt little European nation has somehow convinced the American people that they are this awesome democracy, and if we don't support them, it's going to be World War III. Putin's going to take over the world. Well, really, the corrupt, evil nation is more likely to be Ukraine than Russia. You know, the CIA in the early 2000s did orchestrate a coup. Believe it or not, they did against the democratically elected president of Ukraine, and they put in a puppet government of the United States, of the CIA. That is not democracy. That is dictatorship. Zelensky has not faced his election yet. They continue to allow him to lead the country, and they just skipped over the election because of the war, that there's too much going on. I'm sorry, a war is the best time to have an election. That is when we really know how the people feel. As it's coming to their doorstep. It's not just some political idea in the capital anymore. Before the war, back in like 2020, there was a poll that went out, and about half of Ukraine said that they would be fine with joining Russia. In fact, they didn't care so much as whether they were Ukrainians or Russians. They just wanted to have a good economy. And while we've seen Russia at least make attempts to invest in their economy and become a superpower nation again, Ukraine is just some little corrupt Eastern European country. They've never even tried to do that. I mean, they have a decent agricultural sector, but that's only because of the sheer fertile land that they happen to have. They have done nothing to actually boost their economy. Furthermore, the country of Ukraine is not a U.S. ally at all. They're not a member of NATO. We've never been aligned with them before. Why all of a sudden do we have people flying Ukraine flags outside of their house? That is absolutely, that should be considered treasonous. Russia is not our enemy either. The Cold War ended decades ago. I know some people are old, but Russia is not the Soviet Republic anymore. It is I don't know if I'd say a democracy, I'll give you that, but it's trying to be. It's a lot closer to a democracy than Ukraine is, that's for sure. The people actually support Vladimir Putin. Well, anyway, Trump and JD, they met with Zelensky a couple weeks ago, and they discussed ending the war. Well, it got a little heated because Zelensky refuses to make any concessions. He won't give away any territory, won't admit any fault, nothing. And Trump is kind of forcing him to have a reality check.
He broke this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine? Did you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come on.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this.
what
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about
it. From
it.
the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war,
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble.
Can I answer?
Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President.
Here's what I get out of that. Zelensky does not care about his people. If he wanted suffering to end, he would negotiate. If he wanted to end this war, go talk to Putin. That's how these things are ended. They need to talk and negotiate. Vladimir Putin is not Adolf Hitler. He's not trying to take over the world. He's not got some evil agenda. He's never committed genocide. He's just working in the best interest of the Russian nation, which is what we should expect of all of our leaders. I mean, if we don't have someone working in our country's best interest, why are they leading us? All Zelensky cares about is American money flowing in. All of the oligarchs that are supporting him in his power, they're all making huge amounts of money right now. And he is only there so long as he continues that money train flowing. As soon as that is shut off entirely for good, those people are going to remove him so fast. That is his entire job. He's not the president. He's not the leader. He is just a con artist. Now, Trump, he's the master of negotiation. I mean, he came into this and he just flat out told Zelensky, no, this is what it is. You are in this situation. There's no way out of it other than negotiating and making concessions to Putin, because Putin is in a very good situation. Sure, Russians might not love the fact that they are in war and they have to go fighting Ukrainians, and their economy isn't doing the best from this war, but the people support Russia. They support the motherland. They have a national pride, and they're not going to give up their land that they have fought and bled and died over back to Ukraine just because it's the nice thing to do. The borders of Europe have changed over and over and over again throughout the years, but for some reason, all of us people around my age seem to look at a map of Europe and think, well, this is how it should be, and this is how it's always been, and nothing can ever change. Well, guess what? Just a few decades ago, going back to the USSR, what Russia used to have was most of Europe. They had all those countries. If they really were trying to recreate some evil Soviet republic, don't you think they would have invaded Poland and all of these other countries, Czechoslovakia? You know, there's so many countries that they're leaving alone. It's this issue in Ukraine where they truly believe that Ukraine is full of a bunch of evil Nazis, whether it's true or not. That is what Vladimir Putin believes, and he knows that his people support annexing that land to Russia. But that's all I have time for. Were you offended by this podcast? Good. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you all. Have a great week and stay conservative.